The morning mist clung to the mountains like a shroud of secrets, and Captain Elena Vasquez pressed her eye against the scope of her custom-built rifle. 7,000 meters away, through the haze and distance that would challenge even the most advanced technology, lay a target that could determine the fate of millions. Elena had not planned to become the world's most lethal sniper. Born in a small village in the Carpathian Mountains, she had learned to hunt rabbits and deer with her grandfather's old hunting rifle before she could properly read. Her father, a mathematics professor, had taught her about wind calculations and bullet trajectories as bedtime stories. Her mother, a former Olympic archer, had instilled in her the patience and breathing techniques that would later save nations. The year was 2019, and the world teetered on the edge of a conflict that most civilians knew nothing about. Deep in the classified corridors of military intelligence, whispers spoke of a rogue general named Viktor Kozlov who had gained control of a tactical nuclear device during the chaos of a border dispute between two former Soviet republics. Elena remembered the briefing 3 days earlier. The sterile conference room had been filled with men in expensive suits and women with tired eyes, all bearing the weight of secrets too heavy for ordinary shoulders. General Morrison, a man whose gray beard could not hide his youth, had spread satellite images across the mahogany table like a dealer revealing a losing hand. Ladies and gentlemen, Morrison had begun, his voice carrying the gravity of mountains. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. General Viktor Kozlov has seized control of a mobile nuclear platform in the disputed territory between Moldavia and Ukraine. Our intelligence suggests he plans to detonate the device at midnight, 3 days from now, during the peace talks in Geneva. The room had fallen silent, except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the streets below. Elena had studied the photographs with a methodical precision that had made her legendary among her peers. Kozlov's compound was built into the side of a mountain, protected by natural barriers and sophisticated defense systems. The target will be nearly impossible to reach through conventional assault, Morrison continued. The terrain is too rough for vehicles, and the defensive positions would make an infantry attack suicidal. Our only option is a long-range elimination. Elena's commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Chun, had shifted uncomfortably in her chair. General, the longest confirmed sniper kill in history is just over 3 kilometers. You're talking about more than double that distance. Morrison's eyes had found Elena across the table. Captain Vasquez holds the current record at 3,847 meters. But our ballistics experts believe that with the right conditions, the right equipment, and the right shooter, 7,000 meters might be possible. Elena had felt the weight of every gaze in the room settling upon her shoulders like snow accumulating on a mountainside. She had killed before, many times, but always in the context of active combat where split-second decisions meant the difference between saving her unit and watching them die. This was different. This was calculated, deliberate, and carried consequences that extended far beyond any single battlefield. What makes you believe Kozlov will detonate? Elena had asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what was being proposed. Morrison had activated a wall-mounted screen, displaying intercepted communications and satellite footage. Kozlov lost his entire family in a NATO bombing raid 15 years ago. His psychological profile indicates he's been planning revenge ever since. The nuclear device gives him the leverage he believes he needs to force the withdrawal of all foreign forces for what he considers Russian territory. The images showed a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that held the hollow look of someone who had already died inside. Elena had seen that look before, in the faces of soldiers who had lost too much to continue caring about their own survival. If he succeeds in detonating the device, Morrison continued, the fallout will contaminate an area spanning 3 countries. Conservative estimates suggest 2 million immediate casualties, with long-term effects impacting 10 times that number. More critically, it would trigger immediate military responses from NATO, Russia, and China. We're looking at World War III. Elena had absorbed this information with the calm that came from years of training and combat experience. Fear was a luxury she could not afford, but she understood the scope of what was being asked of her. One shot across an impossible distance to prevent global catastrophe. The technical briefing had followed. The rifle would be a specially modified Barrett M82A1, equipped with advanced optics and ballistic computers. The ammunition would be custom manufactured, with adjustments for the extreme range and environmental conditions. Most importantly, Elena would have to account for factors that no sniper in history had ever faced at such distances. The Coriolis effect becomes significant at this range, Dr. James Hartwell, the team's ballistics expert, had explained. The rotation of the Earth will deflect the bullet approximately 1.2 meters to the right over the course of its flight. Wind patterns at different altitudes will create multiple deflection points. Temperature variations along the bullet's path will affect its velocity and trajectory. Elena had nodded, already running calculations in her mind. Her father's mathematics lessons, combined with years of practical experience, had given her an intuitive understanding of ballistics that complemented the science. "What about the target's protection?" she had asked. "Kozlov will be inspecting the nuclear device at 1,400 hours on the day of the operation," Morrison replied. "Intelligence indicates he follows a strict routine, appearing on a specific balcony of his command center for exactly 90 seconds while conducting his daily inspection. The balcony is partially protected, giving you a target window approximately 60 centimeters wide and 40 centimeters high." The margin for error was smaller than Elena's own silhouette. At 7,000 meters, even the slightest miscalculation would mean missing not just the target, but potentially striking innocent civilians in the surrounding area. Transportation to the firing position had been arranged through a combination of helicopter insertion and mountain climbing. Elena would be accompanied by a small support team consisting of a spotter, a communication specialist, and 2 security personnel. They would establish position on a mountain peak across the valley from Kozlov's compound, using the natural concealment provided by rock formations and sparse vegetation. The evening before departure, Elena had sat alone in her quarters, cleaning and inspecting her equipment with ritualistic precision. Each component was examined, tested, and verified. The rifle had been zeroed at multiple ranges, its barrel precisely adjusted for the specific ammunition she would be using. The scope had been calibrated to account for atmospheric conditions and the extreme distance. But equipment was only part of the equation. Elena had spent hours in meditation, preparing her mind for what lay ahead. The shot would require absolute calm, perfect timing, and unwavering focus. She would have only one opportunity, and failure would mean consequences too terrible to contemplate. Her grandfather had once told her that hunting was not about killing, but about understanding. Understanding the target, the environment, and, most importantly, understanding herself. Elena carried those words with her as she prepared for a hunt that would test every skill she had ever learned. The helicopter flight to the insertion point had been conducted in absolute radio silence, flying below radar altitude through mountain valleys shrouded in darkness. Elena and her team had been dropped at a coordinates 3 kilometers from their intended firing position, requiring a treacherous climb through terrain that challenged even their specialized mountain warfare training. The ascent had taken 6 hours, moving carefully to avoid detection while carrying equipment that weighed more than most soldiers carried into conventional battle. Elena's rifle case alone weighed 35 kilograms, containing not just the weapon but also the advanced ballistic computer, atmospheric monitoring equipment, and specialized ammunition. Reaching the firing position as dawn broke over the mountains, Elena had immediately begun the process of preparing for the shot that would define her life and potentially determine the fate of nations. The location was a natural shelf of rock, concealed from below by overhanging stone and protected from aerial observation by carefully positioned camouflage netting. Her spotter, Sergeant Marcus Williams, was a veteran with 15 years of experience who had worked with Elena on dozens of previous operations. Williams possessed an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions, calculating wind patterns and atmospheric effects with accuracy that complemented Elena's shooting skills perfectly. Range to target confirmed at 7,043 meters, Williams reported, his voice barely above a whisper despite their isolation. Wind conditions are variable, with crosswinds averaging 8 kilometers per hour from the southwest at our elevation. Target elevation shows different wind patterns, estimated at 12 kilometers per hour from the west. Elena settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar comfort of the rifle against her shoulder. The weapon was an extension of herself, its weight and balance as familiar as her own heartbeat. Through the scope, Kozlov's compound appeared as a collection of angular buildings carved into the mountainside, their concrete surfaces scarred by weather and conflict. The waiting began. Elena understood that patience was perhaps the most crucial skill in her profession. The target would appear according to intelligence reports, but intelligence was fallible. Weather conditions could change. Unforeseen circumstances could alter the timeline. A sniper learned to wait with the stillness of stone and the alertness of a predator. Hours passed. Elena remained motionless, controlling her breathing, monitoring conditions, and maintaining the mental focus required for an impossible shot. Williams provided periodic updates on atmospheric conditions while the communications specialist maintained contact with command headquarters through encrypted satellite links. At 1,347 hours, Williams whispered the words that would begin the final sequence of events. Target approaching the inspection area. Stand by for visual confirmation. Elena could see movement through her scope, figures appearing on the balcony of Kozlov's command center. The distance reduced them to barely visible shapes, but Elena's trained, I could distinguish between different individuals based on their movement patterns and body language. Target confirmed, Williams reported. Kozlov is on the balcony, beginning his inspection routine. Wind conditions stable. You have the shot. Elena's finger found the trigger. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm that had become second nature over years of training and combat. The world narrowed to the precise calculations required for a shot that would travel for nearly 9 seconds across a distance that challenged the very limits of human capability. Through her scope, she could see Kozlov's profile as he examined something on a table near the balcony's edge. The man who held the power to trigger global war was unaware that his actions were being observed from across the valley by someone prepared to prevent catastrophe with a single, perfectly placed shot. Elena made the final adjustments to her aim, compensating for wind, distance, and the rotation of the Earth itself. Her finger tightened on the trigger as she prepared to attempt something that military experts had said was impossible, driven by the knowledge that failure would mean consequences too terrible to accept. The moment of decision had arrived, and Captain Elena Vasquez prepared to write her name in history with a shot that would either save millions of lives or demonstrate the limits of human precision under impossible circumstances. Elena's breathing synchronized with the rhythm of the mountains themselves, each inhale and exhale measured with the precision of a Swiss chronometer. Through her scope, General Viktor Kozlov moved with the mechanical predictability that intelligence reports had promised, his inspection of a nuclear device following a pattern that had been observed and documented for weeks. Sergeant Williams lay beside her, his spotting scope trained on the same target, feeding Elena a constant stream of environmental data that would determine whether her shot would find its mark or disappear harmlessly into the rocky slopes beyond Kozlov's compound. Target steady on the balcony, Williams whispered, his voice carrying the calm authority that came from years of partnership in situations where seconds determined the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Range holding at 7,043 meters. Wind at target location shifting to northwest. Velocity approximately 10 kilometers per hour. Elena made micro-adjustments to her scope's windage knobs, compensating for the atmospheric conditions that would affect her bullet's 9-second journey across the valley. At this distance, factors that could be ignored at normal engagement ranges became critical variables requiring precise calculation and intuitive understanding. The custom-manufactured bullet resting in her rifle's chamber represented months of research and development by ballistics experts who had pushed the boundaries of ammunition design to accommodate the extreme requirements of this shot. The projectile weighed 750 grains, significantly heavier than standard ammunition, with a specialized boat tail design optimized for long-range stability and wind resistance. Dr. Hartwell's calculations had indicated that the bullet would lose approximately 60% of its initial velocity over the 7-kilometer flight path, but would still retain enough energy to achieve the mission objective if properly placed. The margin for error remained impossibly small, requiring Elena to place her shot within a target zone smaller than a dinner plate at a distance that exceeded the visual range of most optical instruments. Elena's mind processed the mathematical relationships that would determine the shot's success. Bullet drop at 7,000 meters would be approximately 180 meters, requiring her to aim at a point far above her actual target. The Coriolis effect would deflect the bullet 1.2 meters to the right, while wind conditions at multiple altitudes would create additional deflection that could only be estimated based on Williams's observations and meteorological data. Target is examining the device, Williams reported. Estimate 40 seconds remaining in his inspection routine before he returns to covered positions. Elena could see Kozlov through her scope, a figure reduced by distance to barely human proportions, unaware that his actions were being observed by someone who possessed both the capability and authorization to end his life. The weight of that responsibility settled on Elena's shoulders like a familiar burden, one she had carried throughout her military career. The nuclear device itself was visible on the balcony as a metallic cylinder approximately 2 meters in length, surrounded by monitoring equipment and protective housing that indicated its sophisticated design. Intelligence reports suggested the weapon contained enough fissile material to devastate an area spanning 3 countries, with radioactive contamination that would persist for decades. Elena remembered her briefing on the device's capabilities. The explosion would generate temperatures exceeding those at the center of the sun, vaporizing everything within a radius of several kilometers and creating a fireball visible from space. The electromagnetic pulse would disable electronic systems across hundreds of kilometers, while radioactive fallout would render vast areas uninhabitable for generations. But the immediate destruction was only the beginning. Kozlov's detonation of the device would trigger automatic response protocols from multiple nuclear powers, each acting under the assumption that they were under attack from unknown enemies. Within hours, nuclear missiles would be flying across continents as military commanders struggled to identify threats and respond to what they perceived as the opening moves of global war. Elena forced herself to focus on the immediate task, while part of her mind continued processing the broader implications of her mission. She had trained extensively for long-range shooting, but never under circumstances where a single shot carried such enormous consequences for humanity's future. The rifle beneath her hands represented the culmination of decades of technological advancement in precision shooting. The barrel was manufactured from specially treated steel, with rifling patterns optimized for the specific ammunition she was using. The action was hand-fitted to tolerances measured in thousandths of inches, while the trigger was adjusted to break cleanly at exactly 1.2 kilograms of pressure. The scope mounted above the rifle was a marvel of optical engineering, incorporating computer-assisted ballistic calculations, atmospheric sensors, and range-finding capabilities that exceeded anything available to civilian shooters. The reticle displayed not just crosshairs, but also ballistic drop compensations and windage corrections calculated in real time based on current conditions. 30 seconds, Williams announced, his voice maintaining the same calm tone despite the magnitude of the moment approaching. Target remains stationary. Atmospheric conditions stable. Elena's finger found the trigger, applying initial pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment. Years of training had conditioned her muscles to respond automatically, eliminating the conscious thought that could introduce error at the critical moment of shot execution. Through her scope, she could see Kozlov leaning over the nuclear device, making notations on a clipboard while technicians in protective suits monitored radiation levels and system status. The general appeared completely absorbed in his work, following the routine that intelligence agencies had observed and documented through satellite surveillance and human intelligence assets. The ballistic computer integrated into Elena's scope displayed trajectory calculations in real time, accounting for current atmospheric conditions, bullet specifications, and target range. The predicted impact point appeared as a small dot on her reticle, requiring her to hold her crosshairs at a position that seemed impossibly high above her actual target. Elena had fired thousands of rounds in training, including practice sessions at ranges exceeding 5 kilometers, but nothing had prepared her for the psychological pressure of knowing that millions of lives depended on the precision of her shooting. The mathematical perfection required for success at 7,000 meters left no room for human error or mechanical failure. Her heart rate slowed to the rhythm she had cultivated through years of meditation and breathing exercises, each beat measured and controlled. The rifle became an extension of her body, its weight and balance integrated into her nervous system through countless hours of practice and muscle memory development. 20 seconds, Williams whispered, wind holding steady. You have optimal conditions. Elena could feel the mountain's presence around her, the ancient stone that had witnessed countless human conflicts over millennia. The irony was not lost on her that she lay on ground that had seen wars and peace treaties, invasions and retreats, while preparing to prevent what could become humanity's final conflict. The nuclear device represented the ultimate expression of human destructive capability, a weapon that could end civilization while leaving the Earth itself intact. Elena understood that her shot was not just about eliminating a single individual, but about preventing the unleashing of forces that could render human existence impossible. Kozlov straightened from his examination of the device, consulting his watch before beginning what intelligence reports indicated would be his final review of the weapon status. Elena could see technicians moving around the balcony, their movements suggesting the completion of a pre-planned sequence that would culminate in the device's detonation. 15 seconds, Williams reported. Target positioning optimal for engagement. Elena's breathing reached the natural pause between exhale and inhale, the moment of perfect stillness that snipers learn to recognize as the ideal time for shot execution. Her finger began the final pressure application on the trigger, smooth and consistent, while her mind processed the final calculations that would determine whether her bullet would find its target. The scope's ballistic computer displayed wind corrections that required holding her crosshairs slightly left of the predicted impact point, compensating for atmospheric conditions that had been measured and calculated but could not be perfectly known. Elena made the adjustment based on both technological data and her intuitive understanding of environmental factors developed through years of experience. Through the scope, Kozlov appeared to be concluding his inspection, preparing to return to the protected interior of his command bunker, where he would be beyond the reach of any conventional weapon. Elena realized that her window of opportunity was measured in seconds, requiring immediate action if the mission was to succeed. 10 seconds, Williams announced. Take the shot. Elena's finger completed its pressure on the trigger, feeling the mechanism's internal components engage with the mechanical precision that would release the firing pin and ignite the propellant charge. The rifle's action was designed to eliminate any vibration or movement that could affect bullet trajectory, maintaining perfect barrel alignment throughout the firing sequence. The moment of decision had arrived, and Elena prepared to discover whether months of planning, training, and technological development would prove sufficient to achieve what military experts had considered impossible. Her shot would either demonstrate the ultimate capability of human precision under extreme circumstances, or confirm that some targets remained beyond the reach of conventional weapons regardless of skill and technology. The trigger broke with the clean release that Elena's muscle memory had anticipated, beginning a sequence of events that would unfold over the following 9 seconds as her bullet traveled across 7 kilometers of mountain air toward a target that held the power to determine whether humanity would survive its own technological advancement. Hashtag 9 seconds of eternity. The rifle's discharge shattered the mountain silence with a thunderclap that echoed off stone walls and reverberated through valleys like the voice of ancient gods announcing judgment. Elena felt the weapon's recoil translate through her body, the familiar sensation of controlled violence that marked the beginning of her bullet's impossible journey across 7 kilometers of space and time. The muzzle flash, despite the suppressor's efforts to contain it, illuminated the rocky outcropping where Elena lay in a brief burst of orange and white that would have been visible to any observer equipped with the proper instruments. But her position had been chosen specifically to minimize detection, hidden among the natural shadows and geometric confusion of the mountain's rocky face. Through her scope, Elena maintained perfect sight picture, watching as General Kozlov continued his inspection routine, unaware that death was traveling toward him at a velocity that reduced the Earth's rotation to a factor requiring mathematical compensation. The bullet would require 8.7 seconds to traverse the distance, giving Elena time to observe the target's movements while her projectile flew through air that grew thinner and colder with altitude. Sergeant Williams began his countdown, marking each second that passed while monitoring atmospheric conditions for any changes that might affect the bullet's trajectory during its extended flight. 1 second. Bullet in flight. Target steady. Elena's custom-manufactured projectile, weighing 750 grains and designed specifically for extreme-range shooting, began its journey through atmospheric layers that would test every aspect of its ballistic performance. The initial velocity of 823 meters per second would decrease steadily as air resistance extracted energy from the spinning bullet, while wind patterns at different altitudes would attempt to deflect it from its calculated course. 2 seconds, Williams reported, his voice maintaining the professional calm that had made him legendary among spotters. Wind conditions holding steady. Target remains in position. The bullet climbed through the first 1,000 meters of its trajectory, following the parabolic arc that Elena's scope calculations had predicted. At this stage of flight, the projectile retained most of its initial energy, spinning at 290,000 revolutions per minute to maintain gyroscopic stability while atmospheric pressure decreased with altitude. Elena could see Kozlov through her scope, the general examining a handheld device while technicians made final adjustments to the nuclear weapon's timing mechanisms. Intelligence reports had indicated that detonation was scheduled for precisely 1,400 hours, giving the international community just enough time to receive Kozlov's ultimatum, but insufficient time to mount an effective response. 3 seconds. Bullet approaching maximum altitude, Williams announced. Atmospheric conditions optimal. The projectile reached the highest point of its trajectory at approximately 2,100 meters above Elena's firing position, where air density was 30% less than at sea level. The reduced atmospheric resistance allowed the bullet to maintain velocity more effectively, while the spinning motion continued to provide stability despite the challenging environmental conditions. Elena's mind processed the mathematics that governed her bullet's flight, calculations that had been refined through months of computer modeling and practical testing. The ballistic coefficient of her ammunition had been optimized for the extreme range, while the boat tail design reduced drag and maintained supersonic velocity throughout most of the trajectory. For seconds, Williams reported, target steady, wind holding at 10 kilometers per hour from northwest. The bullet began its descent toward Kozlov's position, gravity accelerating the projectile while air resistance continued to reduce its velocity. At the 4-second mark, the bullet had traveled approximately 3,200 meters and retained 75% of its initial energy, still moving fast enough to achieve the mission objective if properly placed. Elena could see increased activity around the nuclear device as technicians completed their pre-detonation checklist. The weapon's design incorporated multiple safety systems that required sequential disabling, a process that Kozlov was personally supervising to ensure that nothing could prevent the device's detonation at the scheduled time. The general psychological profile had indicated a man driven by revenge and ideological conviction, someone who had lost everything that gave his life meaning and now sought to reshape the world through an act of ultimate destruction. Elena understood that mentality, having encountered it among soldiers who had suffered losses that exceeded their ability to process grief through normal human mechanisms. 5 seconds. Bullet maintaining course, Williams announced. Target positioning remains optimal for engagement. The projectile continued its descent through atmospheric layers that created varying wind patterns and air density changes. Elena's calculations had accounted for these factors, but the precision required for success at 7,000 meters meant that even minor variations could affect the final outcome. Weather conditions that might be insignificant for normal shooting became critical variables at this range. Elena watched Kozlov step closer to the nuclear device, consulting his watch before beginning what appeared to be a final status check. The general's movements suggested someone operating under time pressure, aware that international forces were mobilizing to prevent his planned detonation, but confident that his mountain fortress provided sufficient protection against conventional assault. 6 seconds, Williams reported. Atmospheric conditions stable. Bullet tracking toward target. The bullet passed through the 6-second mark of its flight, having traveled approximately 4,900 meters while losing additional velocity to air resistance. The projectile spin rate had decreased to 280,000 revolutions per minute, but remained sufficient to maintain stability during the final phase of trajectory. Elena could see technicians beginning to withdraw from the immediate area around the nuclear device, their movements indicating that the weapon's arming sequence was approaching completion. The device's timer would be activated by Kozlov personally, giving him the psychological satisfaction of triggering humanity's potential destruction with his own hand. The irony of the situation was not lost on Elena as she watched events unfold through her scope. Kozlov sought to prevent what he saw as foreign domination of his homeland by threatening global annihilation, while Elena attempted to prevent global annihilation by eliminating a single individual from an impossible distance. Both actions required absolute conviction and acceptance of enormous responsibility. 7 seconds. Bullet approaching target altitude, Williams announced. Maintain sight picture. The projectile descended through the final altitude layers toward Kozlov's position, its velocity reduced to approximately 340 meters per second, but still retaining sufficient energy for the mission objective. The bullet's trajectory began to flatten as it approached the target, following the ballistic curve that Elena's scope computer had calculated with mathematical precision. Elena could see Kozlov reaching toward what appeared to be a control panel mounted near the nuclear device, his movements suggesting the beginning of the final arming sequence. The general's face was visible through the scope at maximum magnification, showing the expression of someone about to complete a life's work regardless of its consequences for humanity. The nuclear weapon itself represented decades of technological advancement in weapons of mass destruction, incorporating design elements that maximized both explosive yield and radioactive contamination. The device's detonation would create a fireball reaching temperatures of 100 million degrees Celsius, while electromagnetic pulse effects would disable electronic systems across 3 countries. 8 seconds, Williams reported. Target remained steady. Bullet on final approach. The bullet entered the last second of its flight, descending toward the balcony where Kozlov stood beside the weapon that could trigger global nuclear war. Elena's calculations would be proven or disproven within moments, determining whether her shot would achieve the precision required to eliminate the threat or miss by margins that would render the mission a failure. Elena could see Kozlov's hand moving toward the nuclear device's activation controls, the general's movements indicating someone operating under extreme time pressure while maintaining the careful precision that nuclear weapons required. The device's safety systems had been designed to prevent accidental detonation, but they also created complex procedures that required expert knowledge and steady nerves. The bullet approached the final meters of its trajectory, guided by the ballistic calculations that Elena had trusted with millions of lives. The projectile's path would either intersect with the target zone that Elena had selected or demonstrate that some challenges exceeded even the most advanced technology and human skill combined. 9 seconds, Williams whispered as Elena's bullet completed its journey across impossible distance, carrying with it the hopes and fears of a world that remained unaware of how close it had come to self-destruction through the actions of a single determined individual who had lost faith in humanity's capacity for peace. The bullet struck with the finality of divine judgment, Elena's months of preparation and calculation culminating in a split-second impact that would determine whether humanity survived its own technological advancement. Through her scope, she watched General Viktor Kozlov collapse beside the nuclear device, his hand falling away from the activation controls as her 750-grain projectile found its target with precision that defied mathematical probability. "Target down," Sergeant Williams confirmed, his voice carrying the professional satisfaction of a mission accomplished under impossible circumstances. "Clean hit. Target is eliminated." Elena maintained her sight picture, watching for any movement that might indicate Kozlov had survived the impact, but the general's body remained motionless beside the nuclear weapon that would never fulfill its destructive purpose. The shot had struck with sufficient energy to achieve its objective despite traveling 7,043 meters through atmospheric conditions that had tested every aspect of ballistic science. The bullet's impact had been instantaneous and final, but the consequences would unfold over hours and days as military command around the world gradually realized that the nuclear threat had been neutralized through means they could barely comprehend. Elena's shot represented the longest confirmed sniper kill in human history, achieved under circumstances that would remain classified for decades to protect both operational security and international stability. Through her scope, Elena could see technicians on the balcony reacting to Kozlov's sudden collapse, their movements initially confused before training took over, and they began emergency response procedures. The nuclear device remained armed, but inert, its activation sequence interrupted by the elimination of the only person with both the authority and knowledge required to complete the detonation process. "Secondary targets are securing the device," Williams reported, monitoring the compound through his spotting scope. "No indication of continued threat. Nuclear weapon appears to be in safe configuration." Elena began the process of securing her firing position, breaking down her rifle system with the methodical precision that had been drilled into her through years of training. The weapon that had just prevented global nuclear war would be packed away like any other piece of military equipment, its role in history destined to remain hidden in classified documents that might never see public release. The extraction from their mountain position required the same careful planning and execution that had brought them to the firing point. Elena and her team would retrace their route through terrain that offered both concealment and challenges that tested their mountain warfare training. The helicopter extraction point lay 3 kilometers away, requiring several hours of movement through rocky ground that could break ankles or reveal their position to hostile observers. Elena's communications specialist established satellite contact with command headquarters, transmitting coded confirmation of mission completion while requesting immediate extraction. The message would trigger a complex sequence of diplomatic and military actions designed to secure the nuclear device and manage the international crisis that Kozlov's death would inevitably create. "Command confirms extraction helicopter inbound," the communications specialist reported. "Estimated arrival at primary extraction point in 4 hours. We are to proceed immediately and maintain communications blackout until extraction is complete." Elena shouldered her equipment pack, feeling the familiar weight of gear that had accompanied her through a career of assignments that challenged both her physical capabilities and moral convictions. The rifle case alone contained technology worth more than most soldiers earned in a lifetime, but Elena understood that her true value lay not in the equipment, but in her ability to use it under circumstances that demanded perfection. The descent from their firing position required careful navigation through terrain that offered few safe routes, while carrying equipment that made rapid movement impossible. Elena led the team along paths she had memorized during their ascent, avoiding areas where loose stone or steep grades could compromise their safety or create noise that might alert hostile forces. As they moved through the mountain terrain, Elena's mind processed the enormity of what had just occurred. Her single shot had prevented the detonation of a nuclear weapon that would have killed millions immediately and triggered a global conflict that could have ended human civilization. The responsibility for such consequences was almost incomprehensible, exceeding anything she had imagined when she first enlisted in military service. The nuclear device that Kozlov had planned to detonate represented the culmination of decades of weapons development, incorporating technology that could reshape geography and eliminate cities from existence. Elena understood the physics involved in nuclear fission, the process by which uranium atoms would split apart and release energy equivalent to thousands of tons of conventional explosives. But beyond the immediate destruction, the weapon's detonation would have created radioactive contamination that persisted for generations, rendering vast areas uninhabitable, while causing cancers and genetic damage that would affect children yet unborn. Elena's shot had prevented not just immediate death, but decades of suffering that would have touched millions of families across multiple continents. The international implications of Kozlov's planned detonation were equally staggering. Military commanders in Moscow, Washington, Beijing, and other capitals had prepared response plans that assumed nuclear detonation indicated the beginning of coordinated attack. Within hours of the device's detonation, nuclear missiles would have been flying as each side attempted to eliminate threats before their own forces could be destroyed. Elena's team reached the halfway point of their extraction route, pausing in a concealed position to rest and monitor radio communications for any indication that their presence had been detected. The mountain range offered excellent observation points for hostile forces, requiring constant vigilance during movement through terrain that favored defenders over infiltrators. No indication of pursuit, Williams reported, scanning their back trail through his spotting scope. Kozlov's compound shows increased activity, but no organized search patterns. They appear to be focused on securing the nuclear device rather than locating the shooter. Elena understood that Kozlov's death would create immediate confusion among his subordinates, none of whom possessed the authority or knowledge required to continue the nuclear threat. The general had deliberately concentrated all critical information in his own hands, ensuring that the operation could not continue without his direct supervision. The nuclear device's complex safety systems would require expert knowledge to override, while the activation sequence involved multiple steps that Kozlov had never shared with his technical staff. Elena's shot had not just eliminated the threat, but created a situation where the weapon could be safely secured by international teams without risk of accidental detonation. As they continued their movement toward the extraction point, Elena reflected on the broader implications of her mission. The existence of portable nuclear weapons represented a fundamental change in global security, placing destructive capability in the hands of individuals or small groups who might not be deterred by traditional diplomatic or military pressure. Elena's success demonstrated that even the most sophisticated nuclear threats could be countered by precision application of conventional weapons, but it also highlighted the extreme measures required to address such threats. Her shot had required months of planning, specialized equipment, and environmental conditions that might not be available in future situations. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule, approaching their position with the stealth characteristics that marked it as belonging to Special Operations Forces. Elena and her team prepared for immediate departure, understanding that their mission success will be measured not just by eliminating the immediate threat, but by maintaining the operational security that protected future missions. As the helicopter lifted off from the mountain landing zone, Elena looked back toward Kozlov's compound through the aircraft's windows, seeing the complex where her single shot had changed the course of human history. The nuclear device that had threatened global destruction would be safely secured by international teams. Its radioactive materials eventually returned to controlled storage where they could harm no one. Elena's rifle case rested beside her in the helicopter's cargo compartment, containing the weapon that had achieved the impossible and prevented catastrophe through precision that exceeded the limits of what military experts had considered achievable. The technology and training that made such shots possible represented humanity's capacity to solve problems through intelligence and skill rather than overwhelming force. The flight to the secure airfield where Elena's team would undergo debriefing took them over terrain that would have been contaminated by radioactive fallout if Kozlov's plan had succeeded. Below them, villages and farms continued their daily routines, unaware of how close they had come to evacuation or death through circumstances beyond their control or understanding. Elena understood that her mission would remain classified indefinitely, protecting both operational methods and international stability by ensuring that the full extent of the nuclear threat never became public knowledge. History would record Kozlov's death as resulting from internal conflict or accident, while Elena's role would be known only to those who possessed the highest security clearances. The helicopter approached the airfield, where Elena's debriefing would begin, marking the end of a mission that had tested every aspect of her training and capability while preventing consequences too terrible for public acknowledgement. Her shot had demonstrated that human precision could counter the most sophisticated threats, but also highlighted the thin margin by which civilization sometimes survived its own technological advancement. 3 months after her impossible shot prevented global nuclear war, Captain Elena Vasquez sat in a nondescript office in Geneva, Switzerland, watching diplomats argue about nuclear non-proliferation treaties while remaining unaware of how close they had come to debating the terms of humanity's survival. The conference room's windows overlooked Lake Geneva, where swans glided across water that reflected autumn clouds with the same tranquility that had once seemed impossible in a world threatened by nuclear annihilation. Elena's presence at the International Nuclear Security Summit was officially recorded as technical advisor to the United States delegation, a cover identity that allowed her to monitor discussions about threats that might require her unique capabilities in the future. Her name appeared on no public documents related to the Kozlov incident, which had been classified at levels that excluded most government officials from knowing the true circumstances surrounding the general's death. The nuclear device that Kozlov had planned to detonate was now secured in a facility designed to handle the most dangerous weapons on Earth, its radioactive materials safely contained while scientists studied its construction to better understand how such weapons might be detected and neutralized in the future. The technology incorporated in the device represented advancement in nuclear weapons design that surprised even experts who had devoted their careers to such systems. Captain Vasquez, Dr. Sarah Morrison, the conference's chief scientific advisor, approached Elena during a break between sessions. "I wanted to thank you personally for your contributions to our understanding of long-range ballistic applications in threat neutralization. Your work has implications that extend far beyond any single mission." Elena nodded politely, understanding the careful language that surrounded discussions of classified operations. Dr. Morrison possessed security clearances that allowed her to reference Elena's accomplishment without acknowledging the specific details that remained restricted to fewer than 30 individuals worldwide. The international response to Kozlov's death had unfolded exactly as intelligence analysts had predicted, with various factions claiming credit for eliminating a leader they characterized as unstable and dangerous. Russian officials publicly mourned the loss of a decorated general, while privately expressing relief that his nuclear threats would not require military response. NATO commanders issued statements about the importance of preventing nuclear proliferation, while secretly marveling at the precision that had eliminated the threat. Elena's rifle, The weapon that had achieved what ballistic experts had considered impossible now resided in a secure facility where it would be studied by engineers seeking to understand how human precision could be enhanced through technological advancement. The weapon's specifications remained classified, but its performance had influenced development programs that would produce even more capable systems for future threats. The ballistic analysis of your shot has revolutionized our understanding of extreme-range precision shooting, Dr. Morrison continued, her voice carefully neutral despite the excitement that her research represented. The environmental factors you successfully compensated for at 7 kilometers distance have applications in atmospheric physics, weapons development, and space technology that we're only beginning to explore. Elena appreciated the recognition while understanding that her accomplishment would never receive public acknowledgement. The nature of special operations required anonymity that protected both operational security and the individuals who carried out missions that civilian populations could barely comprehend. Her name would appear in classified documents that might not be declassified for decades, if ever. The psychological evaluation that followed Elena's mission had revealed the normal stress responses associated with high-stakes operations, but also indicated remarkable emotional resilience in processing the magnitude of what she had prevented. Military psychologists had expressed amazement at her ability to function normally after carrying responsibility for potentially millions of lives during a single shot that lasted less than 9 seconds. Elena's commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Chun, had submitted recommendations for every major military decoration, but such awards would necessarily remain classified along with the mission details that justified them. Elena would receive recognition through promotions and assignments that acknowledged her capabilities without revealing their specific applications to prevent global catastrophe. I've been asked to inform you that additional training opportunities are being developed for specialists with your particular skill set, Colonel Chin had told Elena during their private debriefing. The Kozlov incident demonstrated that conventional military responses may be insufficient for certain types of nuclear threats. We need individuals who can operate effectively under circumstances that exceed normal tactical parameters. Elena had understood that her success had established her as a resource for missions that might require similar precision under equally impossible circumstances. The proliferation of nuclear technology among non-state actors created scenarios where traditional deterrent strategies were ineffective, requiring surgical intervention that could eliminate threats without triggering broader conflicts. The training program that followed Elena's mission incorporated lessons learned from her experience, developing techniques and equipment that would enable other snipers to achieve extreme-range precision under various environmental conditions. The knowledge gained from her shot was being systematically analyzed and integrated into curricula that would prepare future operators for threats that had previously been considered beyond conventional response capabilities. Elena's personal life had remained remarkably stable despite the enormous stress of her mission. Her relationship with her family continued unchanged as they remained unaware of her role in preventing global nuclear war. Her parents believed she had been assigned to routine training exercises during the period when she was actually preparing to attempt the longest sniper shot in human history. The isolation required to maintain operational security was perhaps the most challenging aspect of Elena's accomplishment. She could never discuss the details of her mission with friends or family, never receive public recognition for saving millions of lives, never share the burden of knowledge that came with understanding how close humanity had come to nuclear catastrophe through the actions of a single determined individual. Elena's subsequent assignments had involved more conventional operations that utilized her proven capabilities in situations that, while still challenging, seemed almost routine compared to preventing global nuclear war. Her reputation within special operations communities had grown to legendary proportions, though the specific details that justified such regard remained known only to those with appropriate security clearances. The technology developed for Elena's shot had influenced research programs in multiple fields, from atmospheric physics to material science, as engineers sought to understand how projectiles could maintain accuracy across unprecedented distances. The ballistic computer systems that had calculated her shot's trajectory incorporated algorithms that were now being applied to space exploration and satellite deployment. Dr. Hartwell's ballistic analysis had revealed that Elena's shot had actually exceeded the theoretical limits that computer models had predicted, suggesting that human intuition and experience could enhance technological capabilities in ways that purely mathematical approaches could not achieve. This finding had significant implications for the development of human-machine interfaces and high-precision applications. The psychological factors that enabled your success are as important as the technological aspects. Dr. Hartwell had explained during Elena's technical debriefing. Your ability to maintain focus and execute precise muscle control under extreme stress represents capabilities that we're only beginning to understand from a scientific perspective. Elena's story became part of classified case studies that would be analyzed by military researchers for decades, providing insights into human performance under conditions that tested the absolute limits of physical and psychological endurance. Her accomplishment demonstrated that properly trained individuals could achieve results that seemed impossible according to conventional analysis. The nuclear device that Kozlov had intended to detonate was eventually dismantled by international teams. Its radioactive materials returned to secure storage, while its conventional components were studied to better understand how similar weapons might be constructed and detected. The weapon's sophisticated design had incorporated technology that surprised experts who had believed they understood the current state of nuclear weapons development. Elena's mission had prevented not just the immediate destruction that the device's detonation would have caused, but also the long-term consequences of nuclear proliferation as other actors sought to acquire similar weapons. Her shot had demonstrated that such threats could be countered through precision application of conventional weapons, potentially deterring future attempts to use nuclear blackmail against international targets. The classified nature of Elena's accomplishment meant that she would never receive the public recognition that her action merited. But within the small community of individuals who knew the truth, her status approached that of a legendary figure whose single shot had preserved human civilization from destruction through nuclear war. Years later, as Elena continued her military career with assignments that seemed almost routine compared to preventing global catastrophe, she would occasionally think about the morning when she lay on a mountain peak in the Carpathians, preparing to attempt what experts had said was impossible. The memory of that moment, when the fate of millions rested on her ability to place a bullet precisely across 7 kilometers of mountain air, remained as vivid as the day it occurred. Elena's legacy would be preserved in classified documents that recorded humanity's closest approach to nuclear self-destruction and the precise application of human skill that prevented catastrophe. Her name would be remembered by those who understood the true cost of global security, even as the world continued its daily routines unaware of how close it had come to ending in nuclear fire. The silent heroes who prevented disasters that never happened would never receive parades or public monuments, but their actions echoed through history in ways that only they could fully understand. Elena Vasquez had become one of those heroes. Her impossible shot a testament to human capability when guided by training, technology, and the absolute conviction that some threats must be stopped regardless of the obstacles involved. In the end, Elena's greatest satisfaction came not from setting records or achieving recognition, but from knowing that her shot had allowed millions of people to continue their lives without ever knowing how close they had come to losing everything. The children who played in parks, the families who gathered for meals, the lovers who made plans for the future, all existed because Elena had accomplished something that the world's best military minds had considered impossible. Her story would remain hidden in classified archives, but its impact resonated through a world that continued to exist because one woman had refused to accept that some targets were beyond human reach, even when they lay 7,000 meters away across mountain valleys shrouded in the morning mist of an autumn day when the fate of humanity balanced on the edge of a rifle scope.